Thank you. Okay, so hello everybody. Welcome to my presentation on domestic abuse and what it means for children. So, oops. Okay. So before we get started, overall, this is a presentation of a research project or topic that I am very interested in, which is obviously children who witness domestic violence. And if you want to learn more about it, I'm going to post my research paper for public view if anyone is interested. So before I start, I ask that you think about domestic violence and more specifically the children who witness it. Do you even know anything about it? Do you know any of the effects it has on children? Because for me, before taking this class, I had some knowledge of the various topics that we've talked about, but many of these were myths and I had no idea and usually come from things like TV shows and movies. And so I can only assume that you may not have taken a class like this one and may not know the truths behind sexual violence and domestic violence. I was misinformed by a ton of myths that were debunked, and I'm hoping to do the same for you today. So, what is domestic abuse? Domestic violence is the physical, emotional, and or mental abuse from one partner to another. And so who are involved? It's obviously the victim and the offender. And in Rhode Island, this means anyone who are spouses or are former spouses, people with children in common, adults related by blood or marriage, people who live together or have lived together within the last 3 years, and anyone who has been in a relationship within the last year, which is also gender neutral. And any of these people in these types of relationships can be charged with domestic abuse or any of its adjacent crimes. 80% of those arrested for domestic violence charges in adulthood experienced it in their childhood. And domestic violence is one of the most underreported crimes in our country. So with the myths behind domestic violence and children who witness it, the biggest myth regarding it is that children are unaffected when witnessing a parent abuse another. But that's not true. The truth is that studies show that in 50 to 70% of cases in which a parent abuses another, the child is also abused. They also may face other impairments. Additionally, the children that find this behavior normal will continue this cycle of violence into their own relationships when they get older. And I'll explain a little bit more of that later on. So children and domestic violence. So the term commonly used is children exposed to violence, or CEV. And most commonly, children under 5 are most likely to witness domestic violence due to them constantly being around their parents because they're too young to be left alone, leaving them to witness everything that goes on. Often abusive parents have hostile or abusive and neglectful behavior targeted towards the children, which may manifest into the children themselves being abused as well, as I mentioned. Children may be impacted by witnessing domestic violence and may develop symptoms such as fear, anxiety, low self-esteem, depression, nightmares, PTSD, and the constant thought of the event that took place and replaying it in their heads. They may also become withdrawn, beginning to avoid people or places or activities they once enjoyed. Or it may manifest as them becoming angry, irritable, or disobedient. It also affects their relationships with others, such as like peers, siblings, and other social relationships are impacted by the behavior that they witness and may be withdrawn from them too. And lastly, they face cognitive and attitudinal problems that will be carried throughout their lives, such as adulthood, depression, anxiety, or they may accept or distribute violent behaviors in their adult relationships. And so when being exposed to domestic violence, children often experience a lot of the same symptoms as I mentioned before, but the learned behaviors tend to be different depending on gender. So for boys, they learn that males are inherently violent and they learn to disrespect women using violence and using violence in their relationships as they get older. And for girls, it's a little different. They learn that males are inherently violent as well, but that the behavior is normal and they should learn to just take it and that they don't deserve respect. And they accept it in their relationships in the future. And this little picture I have in the corner just kind of explains that children who witness domestic violence suffer the same long-term effects as children who experience it directly. So I think that's kind of crazy. And so I have a bunch of statistics. So over 3 million children witness domestic violence annually, and it's underreported, as only 1 in 4 cases are ever reported. And underneath it sort of explains the symptoms that I just explained. They have school problems, they don't want to be at home anymore, they have trust issues. They may even side with the abusive partner to stay safe, because they think if they take the victim side that they will become abused too, which may be the case in some households, but not all. And then as they grow older, they may experience with drugs or alcohol, eating disorders, or self-harm. And so, like I said before, 3 to 10 million kids per year witness domestic violence in the United States. In a violent household, 50% of the time, the kids are also abused, and UNICEF estimates that around 270 million children worldwide are exposed to violence at home. And children exposed to domestic violence are 5 to 7 times more likely to experience significant psychological problems. And chronic domestic violence exposure directly threatens the developmental necessities to succeed in school. So things like lower IQ scores, impairment of visual and motor skills, poor language skills, and problems with attention and memory, and a whole lot of others. Okay, and so now that the presentation is over, did you learn anything? Or if you have any questions, feel free to ask.